My wife said, "Tonight you'll meet my new partner." I replied, "Charming." Then I paid for my plate, filed for divorce the next morning, sent all contact to my lawyer, and I smiled, because she had no idea that dinner would cost her more than the check. I still remember the way she looked walking into the restaurant, that smug little grin like she thought she had orchestrated some perfect revelation. 15 years together, and apparently she thought a surprise dinner would make it okay to introduce the man she had been seeing behind my back. His name was Derek, and he looked exactly like the kind of guy who thinks his presence is enough to unbalance someone else's life. I didn't rise to the bait. I sipped my water, let her wave him over, watched her eyes light up with that sickening sense of triumph, and I simply said, "Charming." I paid for the drink, for the half of the appetizer we'd ordered before Derek arrived, and I walked out like a man leaving behind a bad scene in a movie. My hand hovered over my wallet, resting lightly, and I imagined every penny landing where it belonged, in lawyers' hands, in protective measures, in the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had already won the first round. The next morning, I was at Karen Simmons' office, handing her all the evidence, the texts, the receipts, the photo proof I had collected while trying to process the audacity of her behavior, and filing for divorce on grounds that couldn't be misinterpreted. Adultery, irreconcilable differences, clean and undeniable. My phone blew up immediately, voicemails from my wife, frantic texts from her sister, Lauren, and I didn't listen to a single one. I blocked their numbers because there was nothing to discuss. She had revealed her hand at the table. Silence followed for a few days, a deafening silence, but a calm kind of peace settled over me. I stayed at my friend Michael's place, a small but tidy apartment that smelled faintly of his old wood furniture and brewed coffee. I felt like I could breathe again, like gravity had shifted, and I was floating just enough above the chaos to see it clearly. I replayed that dinner over and over in my head, not in anger, but as a catalog of her choices, a ledger of actions and consequences. 15 years of shared memories condensed into a single, humiliating scene, and yet my response was precise, almost ritualistic in its simplicity. Then the emails came, long, rambling, blaming me for overreacting, for not being a modern adult, and discussing arrangements, for daring to feel betrayed in a world where apparently everything is negotiable. I laughed at the sheer delusion of it. Derek sitting smugly at our table like he owned the situation, the audacity to suggest that I was the one causing harm. Lauren, ever the cheerleader, sent her own treatise, painting me as cold, distant, unloving. Clearly the reason my wife felt compelled to betray me. It was textbook projection, entitlement wrapped in concern, and I didn't engage. Karen, my lawyer, calmly fielded all of it, her voice steady, a contrast to the frenzy the other side tried to manufacture. Then came the first mediation session, Derek flanking my soon-to-be ex like some trophy she had won, Lauren holding court with performative indignation, and her lawyer, a real shark in a crisp suit, trying to turn the narrative in their favor. Victoria, no. Emily, no. Let's call her Samantha, looked at me with what I imagined was disbelief at my quiet confidence, as if I was the one responsible for her moral collapse. But Karen was prepared. She methodically laid out a timeline, the evidence, the receipts, the investigative reports confirming what everyone but Samantha seemed willing to admit. This was deliberate, a 6-month affair, carefully hidden, financed through means I had only just discovered. Each piece of evidence landed like a brick, the room thick with tension, the air almost painful with anticipation. Samantha's expression faltered. Derek's smirk faltered. Lauren's face went white. Their constructed world of entitlement and self-justification started to crumble in front of them. Claims of emotional distress? Debunked. Allegations of financial oppression? Debunked. Demands for spousal support in the house? Reduced to reasoned compromise. Equity divided. The antique from my grandmother's estate returned to me without issue. The credit card statements, a meticulous ledger of her transgressions, became a deduction from her share, a poetic justice that felt strangely satisfying without being cruel. The mediation ended with them silent, stripped of their performative authority, their lawyer suddenly the one looking uncomfortable, maybe even embarrassed at the spectacle he had been asked to support. I walked out lighter than I had felt in months, the calm fury I had nurtured since the dinner turning into a peaceful sense of victory. Over the following weeks, life stabilized. Samantha moved into a smaller apartment. Derek faded into irrelevance as his financial reality became clear. Lauren disappeared from social media rants once the public record made her claims look foolish. I reconnected with old friends, focused on projects I had neglected, rebuilt the space I live in, painting, reading, organizing, exercising, returning to a life I had abandoned for the sake of marriage that had already chosen its own demise. The apartment smelled of fresh paint, of coffee, of calm, a quiet environment where I could think, where I could sleep, where I could breathe. I sometimes catch myself staring at old photos, remembering moments when Samantha looked different, before the betrayals, before the deception, but the memory is tinged with understanding now, not longing. The lessons are sharper, the boundaries clearer, the control mine. Occasionally, a friend will mention Samantha in passing, or I'll see a social media update about Derek or Lauren, and there's a flicker of amusement, a confirmation that the consequences of choice are unavoidable. I don't seek vengeance. I don't need to. The quiet, methodical approach has delivered its own satisfaction. There is still an echo of what was lost, but mostly there is clarity, a steady sense that I am finally living in the space that belongs to me, and that the chaos left behind belongs to those who created it. In private, I sometimes revisit the ledger, the proof, the careful record-keeping that preserved my rights and dignity, a reminder that calm, deliberate action is far more powerful than outrage. Nights are quiet. The apartment feels like mine. My routine is my own. Friends come, laughter happens, no drama, no manipulation, just connection. 6 months later, the divorce is final, all agreements honored, every detail attended to with precision. The house sold, the antique returned, the credit card misuse deducted, the last threads of Samantha's deceit woven into the record where they cannot harm me. I look back at the anniversary dinner, the moment when everything detonated, and I see not humiliation, but a pivot, a turning point where clarity replaced shock, strategy replaced confusion, and peace replaced chaos. Each morning I wake, I drink my coffee, I walk past a kitchen that is now mine. I watch the sunlight fall on the counter, and I remember. The world responds to action, to choice, to the clarity of will, and I am living in the consequences of my own measured, deliberate decisions. Samantha and Derek exist in their new, smaller world, learning lessons they refused to acknowledge before. Lauren is quiet, perhaps embarrassed, perhaps absorbed elsewhere, but removed from my life entirely. I carry no hatred, only reflection, only an awareness of how precise, deliberate responses can change the course of chaos. I am not the man who sat frozen at the table that night, stunned into disbelief. I am not the man who worried over a note, who imagined every possible betrayal. I am the man who acted calmly, deliberately, ruthlessly when necessary, and rebuilt a life worth living. My friends see it. My small joys, my renewed routines, the return of hobbies, reading, walking, music, quiet meals at my table. It is all evidence of a life reclaimed. I still reflect sometimes, late at night, on what was, on the subtle cracks I missed, on the small signals that could have hinted at Samantha's betrayal. But those thoughts are no longer poison. They are fuel, a reminder that vigilance and calm are more valuable than outrage. The kitchen is blue now, the light warm, the air calm. I can hear the faint hum of traffic, the city breathing outside my window. I sip my coffee, glance at my bookshelf, the new novels, the old favorites, the spaces I fill with intention, and I feel the quiet satisfaction of a life rebuilt without interference, a life shaped by measured choice, not chaos. The memory of the dinner, of a note, of the first shock of betrayal, exists only to remind me of boundaries, of consequence, of clarity. I am not angry. I am not seeking revenge. I am present, observant, deliberate. The echoes of the past remind me only to stay sharp, to act decisively when necessary, and to protect the space I worked so hard to reclaim. And every morning, as sunlight hits the counter, I am reminded that calm action, deliberate choice, and methodical attention to detail can restore what chaos once threatened to destroy. My life is mine again, peaceful, structured, and entirely intentional. The past exists only as a lesson and a confirmation of my own resilience. Every choice I make from this point forward is informed, deliberate, and free from the manipulation and deceit that once haunted it. I carry the quiet satisfaction of someone who has observed, calculated, and acted, and who now lives fully, freely, and without compromise, because sometimes the greatest victories are the ones that happen quietly, deliberately, and without spectacle. My mornings, my afternoons, my nights, all structured around calm, clarity, and intention. Every step forward a small, deliberate victory. Samantha, Derek, Lauren, they exist in consequence, in chaos, in lessons unheeded. I exist in peace, in order, in a life rebuilt by deliberate action and measured reflection. I read, I write, I walk, I talk, I listen, I live. And I remember the power of calm, methodical, human action when faced with the chaos of betrayal. Every day is a choice, every day a test, and every day a chance to rebuild a life worth living, untainted by the manipulation and entitlement of others. And I do. I live, I thrive, I rebuild, I exist. The chaos is gone. The calm remains. The deliberate action wins. I sip my coffee again, quietly, watching the morning light on the counter, and I smile. The world may test us, betray us, humiliate us, but clarity, calm, and deliberate choice create a life that chaos cannot touch. I have learned that. I have lived it. I continue to live it. And it is mine. I revisit old messages sometimes, emails I never responded to, screenshots from that night, snippets of conversations that Samantha thought would manipulate me, and I marvel at the audacity of it all, the arrogance that someone could assume their control over a life that was never theirs to command. I see now that every little choice, every silent decision, every small act of deliberate preparation matters. The weeks following the divorce filing were intense in a quiet way, like walking through a fog with a clarity, to see exactly where each misstep could cost me. I organized every bill, every document, every shared account. I closed the doors on shared utilities, changed passwords, shifted addresses. It sounds mundane, maybe even obsessive, but there was a satisfaction in control, a sort of quiet revenge that no one could see but me. I reconstructed my life piece by piece, almost ritualistically. I bought new sheets, painted the spare bedroom, hung a clock I had wanted for years but never permitted myself to purchase, planted herbs on the balcony, and slowly, methodically carved out a space that felt undeniably mine. Nights were the hardest because memories crept in. I would recall our first apartment, the way Samantha had insisted the blinds be drawn just so, the smell of her coffee in the morning, the faint hum of her favorite playlist, all now ghosts in a space she had abandoned. I allowed myself to feel those memories, but never to dwell in them. I wrote them down sometimes, not for posterity, but to release them, to convert them into a ledger of learning, a blueprint for how to protect myself in the future. Friends checked in. Some were tentative, uncertain how to approach, others candid, offering solidarity. Michael became a fixture, sharing meals, talking about inconsequential things, watching movies late at night, and it struck me how much of my life I had missed in trying to maintain a failing marriage that was already gone. Slowly, the laughter returned, not forced or hollow, but real, earthy, grounding. Weeks turned into months. Samantha's attempts to contact me decreased, her panic morphing into strategic inquiries that Karen dealt with effortless precision. Derek faded from her orbit entirely as the financial reality of his choices became apparent, leaving Samantha alone with the consequences she had so meticulously ignored. Lauren, finally confronted with reality, retreated. The social media storm she had attempted to stir fizzled into obscurity. I moved in the opposite direction. I became more deliberate in my mornings, taking long walks, drinking my coffee, reading, and reflecting. The blue kitchen became a sanctuary, the apartment a quiet testament to the life that had been reclaimed. Each day I woke, I measured progress not in milestones or deadlines, but in calm, deliberate presence. I could see now that the chaos of betrayal is only as powerful as the victim allows. The silence, the methodical attention to self-preservation, the patient construction of boundaries. They became my shield, my armor, my freedom. Occasionally, a new acquaintance or friend would hear the story in fragments and look at me with shock, disbelief. I would smile politely, letting them absorb a narrative, understanding that my calm, my control, my deliberate planning was perhaps more powerful than their initial reaction suggested. Life was mine again, and for the first time in years, truly mine, untainted by manipulation or deceit. And every night I slept knowing that the world, with all its chaos and betrayal, could not touch the careful, deliberate life I had built for myself, and I would continue to build it every single day, quiet, measured, unstoppable, and completely, undeniably my own.